Welcome to Overcaffeinated and Out of Effs, the podcast for burned out, career-minded moms who are ready to stop pretending everything's fine and feel like themselves again. I'm your host, Christy Gamir, burnout coach for moms, licensed therapist, and mom of two. And I'm here to help you reclaim your energy, your identity, and your peace of mind. Whether you're lying awake thinking about the 87 things you didn't get done, or silently resenting the people you love most, this is your space to feel seen, supported, and not so alone. So grab your coffee, hot, cold, or day old, and let's get into it. Hey everybody, it's Christy. Welcome to Overcaffeinated and Out of Effs. In today's episode, I'd like to welcome our guest, Morgan Adams. Morgan is a holistic sleep coach for women who struggle with getting a good night's sleep consistently. Her sleep toolkit helps women improve their sleep quality and their relationship with sleep so they can live less stressful days. Morgan understands firsthand how insomnia can impact quality of life and spent almost a decade dependent on prescription sleeping pills. She's also a 2-time breast cancer survivor who advocates for a lifestyle of disease prevention. So I've invited Morgan here today to share her expertise related to sleep, something that I know so many of you busy working moms struggle with. We're going to chat a little bit about some of those struggles, that moms have with regards to their sleep and about some strategies to help. So Morgan, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for inviting me on. I appreciate it.
Yes, I'm so glad that you're here. Do you mind maybe just starting off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your work and, how you kind of got into this?
Yeah, sure. I am, like you mentioned, I'm a holistic sleep coach. I mainly work with women, and I've been doing this for over 4 years. I got into this because I myself had insomnia for almost 10 years, and I was dependent on Ambien during that time. And that really fueled my desire to help other women with their sleep because there just wasn't a lot of help out there for me. I went to my primary care doctor when I had insomnia, was really given only one option, and that was the sleeping pills. So
Mhm.
I took it at the time, really not fully understanding the ramifications of the side effects. But I just dealt with those because I was like, well, I need to sleep.
Mhm.
So I was able to get off the sleeping pills, fortunately, about 8 years after starting to take them. I had a very loving kind of wake up call by my now husband, who was then my new boyfriend. And he said, when you take those sleeping pills, you kind of turn into a zombie. And it freaks me out. And that was like, whoa, okay.
Mm.
I just got a call out in a very loving way. And I ended up going off the pills and not doing it in a way that was really the best way, and that was just doing it by myself. I kind of went rogue. So for anyone who's taking sleeping pills or psychiatric medication, uh, consult with your prescribing provider to get a taper schedule because you don't want to quit these things cold turkey. But nonetheless, I made it out okay, um, slept fine for many years, and then there was a slight plot twist that we all collectively experienced in 2020 of March of 2020, right when the pandemic
Mhm.
happened, and my sleep started to get a little shaky again, and I did not wanna revert back to insomnia. So I did a lot of research on sleep and got my sleep, in a better spot. And I had previously, like you had mentioned in the intro, had a breast cancer diagnosis. That was in 2018. So that was a pivotal time in my life to really reassess like what I wanted to do in terms of a career. And I knew at that point, after the breast cancer diagnosis, I wanted to help women with their health. I just wasn't quite sure how that would play out. But then when I kind of had this little sleep hiccup in 2020, that was sort of like, okay, I'm so interested in this topic, and I know so many women are struggling with their sleep because I started just organically talking about it on Facebook. And that's
Mhm.
really how the whole sleep coaching career got started. It wasn't, something that I thought I would ever do, but it's really worked out great. And it's been just such a blessing and a privilege to help women with one of the fundamental pillars of health that
Mhm.
it's sadly, a struggle for so many of them.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Well, and I imagine, I mean, you can speak to this better than I can, but it seems like sleep is something that is really lacking for a lot of people these days, right? And so with this podcast in particular, most of the listeners are busy working moms who are
Yes.
also, not a lot of them are not getting enough sleep or they are struggling with sleep. And so I'm curious if you could speak to that a little bit in terms of from your experience, like what are some of the most common reasons that these moms may be struggling to sleep?
Yeah, I think a lot of the moms that I've dealt with, seen, worked with, they are overburdened with so many responsibilities. So they've got responsibilities of taking care of their kids. They've got work responsibilities. And sometimes, and some of my midlife and beyond ladies, they are tasked with handling the affairs of their older parents, taking
Mhm.
care of the needs of their older parents who may need rides to doctor's offices and help with those kinds of things. And so they're just really quite taxed in terms of things they need to get done. And I feel like when they're in that situation, quite often sleep is sort of put on the back burner.
Mhm.
It's like sleep is one of those things where I think a lot of people are like, well, I'll get to it when I get to it. But all
Mhm.
these other things must get checked off the to-do list before I allow myself to sleep. So it's almost like this mindset that sleep is a reward for having completed those to-do tasks. And that really, really can mess people up because what
Mhm.
ends up happening is what I've seen is the sort of low grade sleep deprivation that it starts to accumulate over time. And how that plays out, it's kind of ironic how it plays out is because they think they're doing themselves a favor by saving sleep as their sort of last thing on the to-do list. But what ends up happening when you have not had enough quality sleep is the way you show up the next day really gets impacted. So, for example, you may be more reactive or grouchy with your partner or kids. You may not be able to focus on your tasks at work. So, in essence, you think you are um, doing yourself a favor by working late into the night when in reality, your work becomes harder the next day, and that's not what you wanted to begin with. So, yeah, so I just
Mhm.
what I really try to help people understand is looking at sleep in a different way, and that is think of sleep as something that is going to be helping you for your productivity the next day, not as something that gets put on the back burner, and I'll get to it if I have time. So it's like that
Right.
whole it's really a whole completely different mindset shift that I'm trying to teach people about. Not everyone has these problems. There's the whole issue of insomnia, which is a whole other conversation, which we can
Mhm.
certainly delve into. But I think that's really the heart of what's getting in the way of sleep of so many busy working moms, from my experience.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think we can all, sort of relate to that. I'm sure we have all had those experiences where we were sleep deprived and yeah, and it's no matter what life throws at us, no matter how like the challenges that we're dealing with regards to our work, our kids, anything else, like I think we can all probably, remember a time where we had been through that. And yeah, it's so much harder to deal with those things when you haven't had a good night's rest. When we feel rested, all of those things are still difficult, but it's different, right? They just feel more manageable. And you had been talking about, the next day, right? So if we don't get, whether or not we get a good night's sleep and how the next day and our productivity is affected. I'm also thinking about, like long term, people who consistently are not getting that good night's sleep. How are you finding that moms are affected, longer term? Is there sort of, is it affecting them in other ways?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point you raised. So the shorter sleep deprivation issues like we mentioned, sort of the short fuse, the trouble concentrating, if that goes on for a while, it sort of morphs into another issue, which is quite often weight gain, because when we are chronically sleep deprived, it's really messing with our hormones, specifically our hunger hormones, leptin and ghrelin. So we tend to not be satiated as easily, and our
Mhm.
appetite may pick up. So we're looking at potentially longer kind of weight gain over a longer term, possibly pre-diabetes. When you're not getting enough sleep, it really does impact your blood sugar. Um, Possibly, um, cognitive issues of a different sort later on, and
Mhm.
also mental health issues. So this is really interesting. So people who are not sleeping well over a long period of time tend to be more prone to depression and anxiety. So mental health issues clearly can be quite an obstacle for people who are longer term sleep deprived. So those are some of
Mhm.
the key ones that I've seen happen, sure.
Yeah, so there are a lot of them, and so and again, so those would be more chronic, if it's not just like 1 or 2 bad nights, but if it's happening regularly for an extended period of time. And again, you had said that sort of putting sleep on the back burner for these moms, just not prioritizing it, doing these other things is one of the major reasons. I think another thing that I'm curious about when we're talking about, again, reasons that they struggle to sleep is, if you can speak to it all about, even if they make the effort, let's say they do go to bed and they try to get on a regular sleep routine, just having a hard time, just like falling asleep. You had talked about insomnia a little bit, and maybe that's what I'm asking, or maybe just this idea of falling asleep in general. What are some of the reasons maybe for that?
Yeah, so one of the reasons that I'm seeing working moms having trouble falling asleep and staying asleep are because, like, quite often they are doing things all throughout the day, to-do lists, tasks, nonstop. And so they don't have any white space or downtime built into their day. So what ends up happening is when they put their head on the pillow at night, all of those unresolved issues, thoughts, to-do lists, things that didn't get done keep popping up in their head, which really creates this sort of hyper arousal situation, which prohibits them from falling asleep. And then if they finally do fall asleep, which they usually do, but in the middle of the night when they wake up, those things that were unresolved start to percolate in their heads again.
Mhm.
So in those situations, what I really recommend is for women to actually schedule this white space during their day. I call them mindfulness snacks. And so what that means is really giving yourself a few, let's just say 10-minute blocks during the day that you schedule like a little break. And the mindfulness snack really is something that you're doing that is not making you have any informational inputs. So it's going for a walk without any input from
Mhm.
like a podcast or listening to a training
Mhm.
or doing something where you're kind of like learning something. So it could be just taking a walk without any type of information. It could be doing a 10-minute meditation or a breathing exercise. Could be just sitting there silently. So it's really just giving yourself that white space so that when those things pop up at night, you've had some chances during the day to kind of get those issues resolved. So
Mhm.
that's one of my strategies for helping women who are having trouble shutting it off at night.
Okay, so by kind of giving their brains essentially that opportunity to have that break during the day from the information, from those sorts of things, from working so hard, essentially, it sounds like, then it helps them to fall asleep more easily at night and less likely to kind of wake up. Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. And then another more, I would call it an advanced strategy for this is something that's coming out of CBTI, which is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, which is one of the modalities I use. It's called constructive worry, a constructive worry exercise. And essentially, what this entails is getting a piece of blank paper, drawing a line down the middle. So you're creating two columns. And the left-hand side column, you're writing on the header, problems and worries, concerns, whatever. And
Mhm.
then on the right-hand side of the column is solutions. So what you're doing essentially is doing a brain dump, listing out all of the things that are occupying your brain space, whether that's, my kid is whatever issue they're having, or car broke down, or just whatever thing is on your mind. And then on the right-hand column, you have the next solution in solving that problem. Now, you may not have it
Mhm.
completely resolved, but it's literally the next step. And then you just, you could fold that piece of paper up, put it away, rip it up, put it on your on your nightstand or whatever. And then the whole idea of it is you're getting these things out of your head onto paper, so that at
Mhm.
night they're less likely to come up and resurface. So
Well, that
that's a
sounds
little.
like oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's just a little bit more of an advanced strategy, and often you hear this as being called brain dumping.
Mhm.
So it's either one fills the need.
Well, and it sounds like not only are you getting the fears and the worries out of your head, but also you had mentioned writing down solutions, right? So even if they don't have it entirely figured out, I would imagine just having an idea of what that solution might start to look like offers a sense of relief as well,
Yes,
which probably takes the focus away from the problem specifically.
yes, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So are there any kind of specific behaviors or patterns that cause moms who are maybe struggling to sleep to stay stuck in, these poor sleep cycles?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that there are a multitude of reasons why. One of them we just talked about. The other is thinking about things that they might be consuming during the day that might
Mhm.
be keeping them up at night. I'm specifically thinking about a particular client of mine who I've been working with recently, who has the habit of having a glass of wine or two or more um, to wind down. And I know this is such a common thing among women to have that, just sort of like, we're going to decompress with some wine. And while it does kind of do what it's supposed to do in terms of the relaxation and maybe helping you get to sleep more quickly, what ends up happening on the back end is really disrupted sleep. So the sleep quality does go down. And we have like so many studies to really document this. There's a lot of fragmentation, waking in the night, waking up feeling unrefreshed. So you're not as motivated the next day. And it can also create, a little bit of anxiety for people. So people, I think,
Mhm.
sometimes don't understand that alcohol used over a long period of time isn't a relaxant. It's actually more of a stimulant. So you could
Mhm.
become, and that's one of the reasons why it's waking us up. It becomes a stimulant later on in the night. But there's just sort of this phenomenon with drinking several days in a row. People report having this thing called anxiety.
Mhm.
So they feel more anxious, and of course, it creates this vicious cycle. So I'm not saying do not drink alcohol.
Mhm.
Um, that's not what I'm saying, but I feel like sometimes women maybe need to manage the times that they drink the alcohol in a more productive way for their sleep.
Mhm.
So a couple ways to do this, either, maybe just make the weekend when they have alcohol and maybe limit it to one or two drinks so that they're
Mhm.
having some kind of guardrails instead of having it like on a nightly basis and making it a habitual, just routine kind of thing that they're not even thinking about. So
Mhm.
kind of making it more of an intentional choice and having some guardrails with it.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I mean, I like what you said about it's not like you're trying to tell them not to do it, but it's good for them to be aware and mindful so that they can be more intentional about how they're consuming alcohol, knowing that it can affect their sleep, right? If that's the goal is to improve the sleep, it's good to have that awareness. And then you were talking about, so things that they do outside, during the day, and you were talking specifically about alcohol, but Some of the other things that I would imagine are also affecting their sleep are probably things like, well, obviously like caffeine and then things like smoking, screen time, right? Like what's the
Yeah.
recommended amount of time before bedtime that they should be stopping with their screens?
Yeah, I'm really this is a topic I've really gotten very interested in lately, the screen time issue, because I find that there's a lot of dogmatism against screens. There's a lot of messaging saying stay off screens for X number of hours. And I'm really moving away from this very prescriptive sort of like, this is how long you should stay off of it. I think a lot of people are feeling guilty about using a screen at night
Mhm.
unnecessarily. So this is sort of my new sort of philosophy on screens that has percolated over, the last several months of just seeing some more research coming through about blue light and about procrastination. So, really, my takeaway from all this new information is that we shouldn't necessarily demonize the screens for the blue light. Um, the blue light in some studies, like it's very conflicting, Christy. Like there's so much conflicting data out there, but some data shows that blue light is like completely hindering our melatonin and ruining our sleep, while other studies are showing that it's only delaying our sleep by a very, very short period of time, like a matter of like 4 minutes,
Mhm. Okay.
which isn't very long. Um,
Yeah.
I think that also when we're looking at content online or on TV, we really want to just be mindful of how stimulating it is cognitively. So
Mhm.
to say no screens or no TV. I mean, I'm a sleep coach. Like I understand all this stuff. And I have chosen to actually have TV watching as my wind down routine.
Mhm.
Actually works for me very, very well. And the
Mhm.
reason why is because I'm watching like a regular TV that's like fairly far away from me. And there's a study showing that if a TV is like 9 or 10 feet away from you, it's not impacting your melatonin levels because the light is
Mhm.
not bright enough. Um, so it's far away from me. I'm also watching content that is not stimulating.
Mhm.
So things like The Great British Baking Show or a
Mhm.
documentary about travel or food, not the news, not like a thriller or some kind of crime show. Those are the kinds of things that I think that can overstimulate people cognitively and make them start thinking about the plot or what's going on with that show as they're going to bed.
Right. Right.
Um, yeah, so I think there it's just such a very nuanced conversation. And also, when you are dealing with insomnia, quite often a familiar rerun is more anxiety relieving or alleviating rather than doing nothing, right? So
Mhm.
someone who has insomnia and who has a lot of pre-bedtime cognitive worry, if they're left to do nothing, if they have nothing to focus on, they're gonna focus on their anxiety about sleep. So
Yeah.
watching a rerun of Friends or, a show that they grew up with or whatever, and
Mhm.
now I'm dating myself, but
No, oh my gosh,
but,
that's my all-time favorite
it's,
show. I'm actually watching it right now.
yay, so good, so
Yeah.
good. So watching that sort of familiarity, like the ending of the show, that can be really helpful for people who have a
Mhm.
lot of pre-bedtime time anxiety associated with insomnia. So to answer your question, I went in a roundabout fashion with this, but I don't really have any like you shouldn't do it this long. You shouldn't. I think here's where I would caution people is you don't want to do this for hours. You don't want to
Mhm.
scroll for hours. That's probably going to really disrupt your sleep. But if you give yourself 15 or 20 minutes of sort of that, like, I'm going to scroll, like, it's probably not a big deal for you if you're doing it for 15 or 20 minutes. And I think sometimes the screens are so demonized that even that short period of time, people feel guilty. They
Mm.
feel like, "Oh, no, I was on a screen." Well, like, it's not it's not as cut and dried
Yeah.
as the media has
Well,
made it
most
out
things
to
are
be.
not. Most things are
Yeah.
not so cut and dry. It actually was kind of, you might have seen me smiling a little bit. As I was listening to you talk and you were talking about reruns, one of the things that came to mind for me is that I'd actually heard once somebody referred to reruns as sort of like wearing sweatpants for your mind, for your brain. And I laugh a little bit because, I love watching reruns. I watch them all the time. You talk about Friends, I've probably seen it a dozen times. My husband and I, when we watch a show together, it's always sort of like this disagreement because he wants to watch something new and exciting. And I'm like, show me the things I've already seen because then it's not so stressful.
Yeah,
Um,
I love that.
yeah. And coming back to just, what you had said before about this idea that, again, it's not so cut and dry, and it's not like you can or can't do screens, but, just some of these other things to take into consideration. And with that, I just kind of wanted to mention too that, because, we are talking to working moms, is that I have also read, and you can tell me if this is accurate or not, that doing work-related tasks on your screen, such as checking emails, things like that, is probably not the best thing to do right before bed because that can then make it harder to fall asleep.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that up because that is very, very true. So what I recommend is giving yourself a buffer. I mean, safely 2 hours before bed, shut down work emails, like shut down projects, because it is just too stimulating. And on that note, I've actually run into quite a few people, clients and otherwise, who will wake up at 4 in the morning and they're like, I don't think I'm going to get back to sleep. And so what do? They get up, they make the coffee, they turn on the lights in the kitchen, they fire up their laptop, and they get to work because they're like, well, I might as well get a leg up on my day and be productive if versus just lying here. Okay. I want people to rethink that. I really want you to
Mm,
rethink that if that's something that you
mhm,
do. And the reason why is because our brains are a pattern recognition machine. And what's going to happen is your circadian rhythm may end up shifting earlier, and you may be training yourself, in essence, to continue to wake up at 4 a.m., which is not your goal. So
no.
start your day when your day is supposed to start. Not at 4 a.m. And
Okay.
if literally your work begins at 4 a.m., sure. But if you're beginning it early to get a head start on your day, rethink that and do something that is more relaxing. Like if you, this is a whole other thread, but if it's 4 a.m. and you usually get up at 6, you know, you can lie there and just appreciate rest, appreciate the comfort of your bed, and maybe daydream or think about
Right.
pleasant thoughts. There's several
Mhm.
different techniques that I teach people on how to do these distraction techniques and whatnot. Um, but observing that time as your time to rest, um, reaffirming that there's nobody who needs you right now. It's your time. Like this is your
Mhm.
time. It's not your
Mhm.
company's time. And, AKA getting up and doing the work, it's your
Right.
time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if I mean, I really yeah, if people are doing this on a consistent basis, what they find is that they typically will start to wake up at that time because their brain has been trained to be conditioned for that wake up.
That's
So,
interesting.
yeah.
That's a really interesting thing to think about. So, with that in mind, I'm curious, if we're talking about things that moms are doing that affect their sleep, I'm curious, what are some common things that maybe you've seen people try, where they're actively trying to improve their sleep, but these are things that maybe just don't work? So, maybe some myths around things that might be helpful.
One thing that comes to mind is the trackers.
Hmm.
So the trackers are again of another very nuanced topic. I'm finding that there are people out there who have insomnia and they're very, very concerned about their sleep, and they wear a sleep tracker, and it actually makes them more anxious about their sleep. We call
Hmm.
that sometimes orthosomnia. So it's like you've heard of orthorexia is like sort of the fear of different foods.
Hmm.
Orthosomnia is sort of like the obsession about fixing your sleep and
Hmm.
getting obsessed about, trackers and the data. So that's one thing that I've seen lately, backfire on a lot of people is over over interest, over consumption with the sleep tracker data, I think is something that people think is good. Like, I'm gonna get a sleep tracker. That's gonna help my sleep. No,
Mhm.
that's usually not true for a lot of people. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, that's kind of a big one. Um, Another one is very inconsistent sleep and wake times.
Okay.
So one thing that I really like to share when I'm doing these podcasts is the whole 8-hour myth. This is super important. And this is kind of new data that not a lot of people know about. So we often hear that, okay, you must get 8 hours of sleep.
Mhm.
When in reality, that is not exactly true for everybody. So some people need a little bit more, some people might need a little bit less. And what we really need to be more mindful of is the consistency of our sleep wake patterns. And I
Mhm.
won't go into all the details because I know we're running kind of close to time, but essentially there was a couple of huge studies in the past 2 years that really did confirm with thousands of people that the consistency was really what mattered with people's um, long-term health and mortality rates. So bottom line for all of this, if we won't get into the weeds with the study, but if you can keep your sleep wake times within about 30 minutes,
Mhm.
then you are really, really setting your circadian rhythm up for the best
Okay.
possible outcomes and long-term health. So, and that may mean, you know, not sleeping in on the weekends. I know this is really a hard thing for people to digest, but it's so important to prevent yourself from having social jet lag, which is like
Mhm.
having jet lag, but you're not going anywhere. So,
Mhm.
I mean, I was in this situation myself for many years, getting up at 6 a.m. every morning for work, and then sleeping till like 9 on the weekends.
Mhm.
So there was that 3 hour gap. And in reality, I should have shrunk that gap to no longer than an hour, right?
Mm.
So
Well,
that's one thing I really want people to understand is just be more concerned about that consistency than how many hours you're logging.
yes, fortunately, that is not a problem I personally have. My 5-year-old gets me up by 6:30 every day. Doesn't matter if it's, what day
Yeah,
of the week, doesn't matter if there's, daylight savings or anything else. It's the same time every day. He
yes.
he keeps me on that schedule.
Yeah, well,
So,
he's got a strong circadian rhythm, so good
yeah.
for him.
Yeah, we'll see how long that lasts.
Yeah,
Hopefully one day
that will
he'll
change.
sleep a little
When he's a
later.
teenager, it will be different.
Yes, I'm sure. Okay, so if we're talking about, just simple, practical things that these moms can do to try to make things a little bit better in terms of their sleep. So you talked about a couple already, right? You talked about, giving themselves these breaks during the day, a couple 10-minute breaks. You're talking about getting on a consistent sleep schedule. You're talking about, being more mindful of, habits and, lifestyle things, happening around, bedtime with like wine drinking. And we talked a little bit about screen time. Sounds like all of those are sorts of things that these moms can keep in mind and do to make their sleep a little bit better, it sounds like.
Yes, all of those things add up. So it's the small decisions you make from the time you get up till the time you go to bed. A lot of people, I think,
Okay.
make the mistake of focusing in way too much on that last hour before bed, which is
Mhm.
important, but there's so many things that we do during the day that impact our sleep that we need to focus on.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and back to the beginning of our conversation, you had mentioned that one of the real big challenges for working moms in particular has to do with prioritizing, right? And putting it on the back burner. So it sounds like that's something we really want to work towards also is making it a priority. And so I'm curious, like, what mindset shifts do you think need to happen in order for moms to be able to start prioritizing their sleep?
I think that really the biggest mindset shift is that rest and sleep is not something that is um something that you do after you complete something. It's actually something that is innate for us. It's like our right.
Mhm.
It's our right to actually have that sleep and have that rest. It doesn't have to be earned by completing a to-do list. I think that's really one of the main mindset shifts that I would really focus in on if I was um, in a position where I was not really prioritizing my sleep. So I think that that can be a very powerful mind shift for people.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I've also, one of the ways that I like to think about it, and I've said this to people too, is I try to think about it in terms of like let's say I am trying to get to bed, an hour earlier, is to think about it in terms of like an hour invested rather than an hour spent. Because to your point from before, when we get that good sleep, when we get that good rest, then it affects our next day, right? Where we can be more productive and we can be more patient and all of these things that we sort of gain back versus just losing an hour of sleep. Or I'm sorry, losing an hour in our day because we're choosing
Yeah.
to use it for sleep.
Yeah, that's a very powerful mindset shift. Almost said a bad word there. Woo, okay, mindset shift with a T at the end. Um, that's a very powerful one. It's really an investment in our next day
Mhm.
versus something that it's not a waste of time. I think that we, as a culture, have been viewing sleep for many years as I'll sleep when I'm dead. Um, ru Sleep is for the weak. I mean, there were T-shirts around in college that said
Mhm.
that, and I think we're gradually starting to get the real message on sleep that it is definitely not, something that we should be putting on the back burner or saying it's a waste of time. It's actually really an investment in our health, our productivity, and our happiness for ourselves and the people around us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, and for the moms who are listening who, maybe have found that once they've had kids, let's say, they just started really struggling with sleep and they think, this is their new normal and there's no way out of it. This is just something that they have to deal with, at least during this season with, young kids. What would you say to them?
Well, I would really just, say that this is a season in your life where your sleep may not be at its best, but will be seasons after where you can, have better sleep. It's not forever. I think
Mhm.
that, that's a message we can tell ourselves, but I also think that if we are feeling very, pulled in many different directions and we have too much on our plates, then we should really try our best to ask for help,
Mhm.
from partners, friends, other family members, to see if there's any way, or, even if you have the financial resources, hire somebody to help you meal prep if that's what's
Mhm.
really keeping you stuck doing some stuff that you don't want to be doing. So,
Mhm.
yeah, tapping into those resources if you have them, I think is really a wise investment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. I agree with that. And as I'm listening to you talk, I mean, I find this all very interesting, not only because I think it's just such an important topic. I personally, my children, they're good sleepers now, but they did not start off that way. My daughter was a year and a half before she was sleeping through the night. My son was 2 years before he was sleeping through the night. And it's really, really hard when you don't get that sleep. But to your point, these seasons are temporary. We
Yes.
grew them, and that things can change, and they do. So I think that's great. So for people who are listening, who want to learn more about this, who want to learn more about you and your work, where can they go to do that?
Oh, thank you for asking. So, you can find me on my website, morganadamswellness.com. I offer a free consultation opportunity and I have a really cool free guide. It's
Mhm.
called Awake Again at 3 a.m., your guide to why you're waking up and what to do about it. It's a free guide for anybody who's dealing with those middle of the night wakenings. I highly suggest getting that on my website. I'm also pretty active on Instagram. So if you're there, I am morganadams.wellness. Hop in my DMs and say hi. Don't be a stranger. I love to talk about this topic a lot.
Okay, okay. So all of that will be available on the show notes, right? So the website, Instagram, you said, the guide you said is on the website, correct? So
Correct.
they
Yes.
can go to find that. Okay. And so yeah, I will definitely make that available for everybody who wants to, learn more. So before we wrap up for today, if you could leave the moms who are listening with one final piece of advice, what would it be?
I think that it would be very mindful of how you're speaking about your sleep and your children's sleep. So a
Mhm.
lot of times I will hear someone say, "I'm a terrible sleeper. I'm a bad sleeper." Um, and so quite often we believe that story that we tell ourselves.
Mhm.
And so a reframe would be if you're having trouble sleeping, I'm having trouble sleeping, but I'm doing X, Y, and Z to get the situation sorted out versus saying I'm the worst sleeper ever.
Mhm.
And, if your child is not really the quote best sleeper, um, not 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 sharing that information with the child, right? Because those
Mhm.
labels that we get as children follow us through adulthood. I've worked with so
Mhm.
many women who say, yeah, my parents always called me a bad sleeper. And they show up to
Mhm.
me thinking the same thing. And we have to really work on that mindset shift about like, hey, you're not actually a bad sleeper. You've got some challenges, but they're work outable.
Yeah. No, I mean, it sounds like with some people, those beliefs are just ingrained from such an
Yeah.
early age that I would imagine that, yeah, that can be a lot of there can be a lot of work done around that to help with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. This has all been really great. I really, as I said before, I appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to me. I do think that sleep is such an important topic and something that so many of these moms struggle with. And so I just think everything that you shared today was super valuable. And I do appreciate that.
Well, I
Um,
appreciate it.
yeah. And and you clearly know a lot about the topic. I can tell that this is definitely something that you are passionate about. And so this has just all been so great. And as always, for the moms who are listening, if any of this resonates, if you did find these things to be helpful that we talked about today, please feel free to look up Morgan. You can learn more about her. Please, share this podcast with any other moms that you think might be able to use some additional support because we are all in this together.